Of course, appreciate you for having me.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm excited.
I've been looking forward to this for a minute.
Yeah.
This is the third episode, Starting Point. So we've been working at it. It's been slow and steady, but definitely thrilled to have you on right now. We've really been trying to diversify the kind of artists that come on. So we had Mochi on. Shout out to Mochi, the DJ. We had Michael last episode, lyricist, writer, very talented. A lot of big things coming his way. And then you. And I think, for those of you who do know Sam, and then some of you who don't, he is an entrepreneur, designer, and just overall creative. So I've been really looking forward to and a brand owner, I think, at large, mostly. You're a very brand-centric guy, so I've been meaning to delve into, like, really how you got started, where you are now, and then the aspirational, ambition that you have for progression.
Definitely. Now, I want to start off by saying appreciate you for having me. I think I'm allowed to say I'm a fan of the show. I've been keeping up as well, so I got a chance to check out the Mochi episode. And yeah, I was just super impressed with everything that you've been able to do with the show so far. And so that's why I was actually eager to jump on, because I really hate doing interviews or just like conversations for the most part. But I think you're a great interviewer. I think I appreciate the professionalism behind it as well. So I'm excited to see this episode.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Slow and steady makes wins the race. So definitely trying to stay consistent. Also, shout out to Courtney off camera for this space, Negative Space, located out in Pilsen. Definitely come check this out if you have any studio needs. Great location, great aesthetic. So shout out to Court. Very, very, very grateful for her generosity. So let's get started without further ado, man.
All right, let's do it.
Take us back. Take us to the original conception. What you were doing when the spark hit you for this.
For sure. So I'll just take you all the way to the beginning. Around the sixth grade or so, I think I had fell in love with art. So I used to draw these little characters all of the time. And so by eighth grade, I would say I was a pretty good artist, and I was my art teacher's favorite student because I always come to class prepared and eager to do whatever she had us doing. I was creating my own type, just all this really fun stuff. And I think during the pandemic, something happened where I had looked under my bed, and I was just trying to clean up, and I saw this sketch, and it was a sketch for something called Shark Clothing. And so it was Shark Clothing, and then it was 2010. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is I guess I've always had this desire to start a clothing line, even way back in 2010, before I finally did it 6 years later. But it was something that I did as a freshman in high school that I drew, and it was just it's interesting how I always get into art. That's when I first started drawing basketball players, that type of thing. And I somehow, some way, landed at clothes. And then I was nah, I'm not gonna do that. And then when I got back into art again, I still landed back into clothes. And I was okay, I think I'm gonna do it this time. So yeah, basically, I was really, really big on Tumblr. So I'm fast forwarding to actually my freshman year of college. I was really, really big on Tumblr, and so I was just consuming a lot of content at the time. I am obsessed with the concept of 10,000 hours, and so even though I didn't release Progression until 2016, I had started actively working toward it in 2014, and so I was doing a lot of just research at the time about what's a good t-shirt, what's not a good t-shirt, what am I drawn to, what do these sneaker releases look like, how do I feel whenever I have a certain unboxing experience, right? All of these things that reminded me of when I was a 15-year-old who was buying stuff on the internet and getting it in the mail, remembering the small things like the thank you cards and the stickers that came with the t-shirt that made me feel like my purchase was worth every single penny, right? I bought a t-shirt and you sent me extra stuff that you didn't even need to. And so I was just putting in my 10,000 hours. And so I remember I drew, I made this really crappy t-shirt. I printed it out, but it was a really big moment for me because it was the first time where I had something in my brain and I was actually able to physically see it, it was tangible. And so after that, I just kept on, consuming content. So I was big on Tumblr. And so there was this t-shirt that had came out and it had a really, really great message on it. It was something like, I drink white tears for breakfast or something like that. But it was just like designed really plainly and it just wasn't fun. I didn't think it was doing a good job at capturing. And this is all things that I'm retroly thinking about these things. So at the time I didn't have the language for any of this stuff, but this was when my brain was processing it. But it was like, it just didn't evoke the fun that I thought the saying was gonna have. And so I was like, that's interesting. And then I had saw a Black Panther Party t-shirt, and I was doing a lot of research on the Black Panther Party at the time as well. And so I essentially was like, remembered the t-shirt where just like this people started their t-shirt brand and was like selling t-shirts. Yeah. Then I saw the Black Panther Party and was just like, what if I was able to talk about moments in Black history with a knowledge of streetwear. So I would be able to like make t-shirts that said something that never felt corny. Like that was the number one thing, was like it just can't feel corny like this other t-shirt did. And so from that point on, that's kind of like how I was able to define, right? So one of the reasons why I fell in love with your show when I was watching it was just because it reminded me a lot of a show that I used to watch on YouTube. And it was just like the blueprint. It was like the blueprint of success. And it was really interesting because it was almost like you were able to be mentored by like Timbaland or whoever was on the episode. And you were able to kind of see what they were doing. So with the name and everything about like what was like your point or like how'd you get to from here to there. So like, yeah, for me, it was like creating that t-shirt was like really important because it was able to show me like I could physically make something, but then moving on from there, it was like being able to define what I wanted to make my clothes talk about. Absolutely. That was the next step, right? So it was like, at first I was just kind of just slapping slapping logos on a t-shirt just to see it could be done, right? But it's like, you're not gonna get very far if that's all your brand ever is, especially in this day and age when there's just so much oversaturation, right? Everyone has something, especially in the creative space. And so after I was able to define it, I was able to create my brand identity, and that's kind of how I was able to start building out progression. And so it's just crazy to kind of see how far like the brand has come, because I still know all of the things I still want to accomplish, but even being able to take a step back and being able to say like, all of the stuff that I'm able to do now, I never even thought was possible.
Right. So let me stop you right there.
Yeah, okay, for sure.
I got to unpack a little bit.
Definitely.
First off, brands are like, they convey meaning. Yeah. They can make you feel a certain way. They are definitely more than just a logo. Yeah. They carry a weight. They carry like might carry a community, might carry a culture. There's a lot that you can attribute to a certain brand. Yeah. When you are really a loyal customer, or you just really dig the brand, like you really have like a passion for it. And so, even like adding those thank you notes, like you said, like that's remembered. Like those are the things that, that's why kids go to Mickey D's and they want the toy in the box. Or I can't remember what it was called, but my parents never took me to Mickey D's because we had rice at home. Yep. But then you spoke on refining the process. Mm-hmm. Like before you had even come up with the brand, you were already kind of sketching. Yeah. Really just trying to get your craft like down pat. Yeah. The 10,000 hour thing, and that's how you start to develop mastery. That's how you really start to get into your own craftsmanship and really get to hold it at your own pedestal. Kind of control the message and where it goes. And I've heard you speak before about how you don't even want to have your stores in certain stockists, just because you want to control where it's being sold, who has access to it, why they're buying it for the right reasons. And so I think just even moving from just making a thing to understanding that, okay, now I have the ability to actually make people feel a certain way. I can spread a message. I guess not when, but that's kind of like the why of the brand. Like those are things that people care about. Not so much like the what, but definitely like the why. And I want to dig into the how too, because I know you've, last I heard you speak at the Soho was, I think a couple months ago, and you were talking about, I think, conception to reality, right? Yeah. And I think that is a really good formula. I don't know if you have like a formula that you go through before you come up with a collection or a new piece. And I was actually ruminating on something that you had said earlier too about just like branding, and I was thinking, are you thinking about the brand first when you make a new collection, a new piece, or are you thinking about just making the dopest next, like hoodie, the next tee, or is it? It's probably like a little bit of both.
Yeah, no, it's wow. That's a really good question because I never have thought about it like that. But the number one thing I think is the story. Like that's always the number one thing. But where the story's pulled from is just absolutely crazy. Like I'm working on a collection, and I had a partnership. And then we're still trying to work it through, but right now it's looking like the partnership's gonna have to be on pause. But I still designed an entire collection around the partnership. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna keep the designs for myself and just release them through my own. And the whole collection was like, the color of the collection was supposed to be forest green. We're gonna be looking at a historical point in Chicago, so on and so forth. And then I go on the internet to go purchase the hats, and the color that I need is out of stock, right? I don't want to sacrifice any of my story by changing the hat color that I'm going to offer. So I say, how do I still offer this product without
compromising?
Yeah, and I literally created an entire, so my next collection was born out of a lack of resources. Like, the story's still going to all be there, but the cool thing is I was able to take this collection and shift it down towards later in the year when the hat is gonna be back in stock, and be able to use a already existing color that still kind of helps me tell that story, and it tells a completely different story than the one. So like I'm able to now create an entire collection. So my process is literally like looking at the world around me, looking at the resources I have, and then being able to start building around that. And then the way I build around that is research. Like that's number two. I always tell people, like I describe myself as I'm just a researcher who happens to design well. Like that's everything that I'm like committed to. Like I was having a conversation with someone, and she and I were talking, and she was, I was like, libraries are my favorite places in the world. She was like, why do you say that? And I was telling her, it's the only thing the United States government ever got right. Like you can literally get your sticker for your license, like at the library. Like that's crazy, right? Like we know how long those lines can be. I literally went into the libraries are the greatest place ever. And so I needed to get a book for a research project I was gonna get. I've been buying way too many books. I had no more money. So I'm like, let me see if I can get it from the library. It was available in my local library. And yeah, the girl was like, you don't be at the library. And I was like, no, like I literally was just at the library 2 weeks ago getting this book. And it's crazy, I was like going through the book, and everything that I needed for the collection was inside of the book. Like I'm reading stuff and I'm just like, oh, the collection is getting better, it's getting better, it's getting better. And before I close, I just want to also say like that's part of like the 10,000 hours I'm committed to. And I think the interesting thing is like the first 10,000 hours are the most grueling because it's the most research, it's the most like learning and so on and so forth. But what I realized is the closer you get to the 10,000 hours, the more fun it becomes, because I found myself falling back in love with design, because now that I understand like the structure behind it, I'm able to start breaking apart the structure and asking myself questions like, why can't a motorcycle have wings, right? Like, who says that's not possible? What does that look like? Is it functional? Is it not functional? So like I'm able to just start breaking things apart and putting it back together in my own way. But I wasn't able to do that until I put in a little bit more of my 10,000 hours. And I always tell people I'm gonna get my 10,000 hour on my deathbed. That's where it's gonna come.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully before. But
well, I guess it's just a metaphor to say like you're never done learning.
True,
yeah, you know.
True. Yeah. Okay, so that creative like style, that process that you I guess learned to act on, is that from like a certain place? Did you learn that from like someone you were researching, or is that just kind of how you just kind of developed as your own artist?
That's just how it developed. It's just come like people. My favorite thing is when people are just like, "Oh, you're really like smart," or "You're a genius." I'm like, I just read. Like that's it. Like I just read. One of the easiest ways to read too is like I'll like randomly think of something, go on Wikipedia. I'll just be in my car. I'll just like highlight an entire Wikipedia page and then put the speak function on and just listen to it like it's a podcast. So I read through like a bunch of like just Wikipedia pages like that. But yeah, like all of my best ideas come from books, right? They say if you wanna hide something, like put it in a book. But like yeah, I think you just gotta figure out a formula that works for you. But yeah, this is just what happened to like allow my brain to just move in that way. But like yeah, I definitely have a lot of inspirations. I think It's interesting. I don't really necessarily study Virgil like that, but anytime I stumble across a video of his where he's like explaining his process, he helps put a lot of language around the stuff that I have. I spend a lot of time on YouTube in general, and I watch a lot of video essays on YouTube, and I'll just have like these crazy or random thoughts like the night before, and then I'll watch a YouTube video essay, and like a person in the video is like explaining this concept. Like right now, I'm obsessed with like hyper reality, where it's like everything is like a reference of a reference. So
Referential.
we used to like our books and our films and television used to reference real life, but now the further we get away from it, our references are like references of old TV shows, and so that creates this hyper reality where we're living in this actual world, but we project onto the television screens and are saying, my love life should look like this fake movie, TV show, which is all made up, right? So we kind of live in a hyper reality world. I don't know, it's crazy, but I don't want to go too far over there.
It's funny because we say art imitates reality, but now it's like art is imitating art that imitates reality.
Yeah, basically.
So it's like we're just stepping, more.
It's very meta.
Yeah, more and more meta. But you said something interesting before, and I want you to like talk about that for people who might not know, or if you've ever shared this. But the story, what is the story that you were trying to convey? What is the story you want to tell? What is it that?
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think the story continues to transform over time, and two things like kind of have happened recently. I'm forgetting the first one, so I'll go to the second. Well, actually, I can. So the story that's being told was just like, how do I bridge the gap between social justice and fashion, right? Like that is like when people ask what progression, like that's the mission statement. Like that's how like the brand is, right? But I also made that up when I was like 20, 21 years old or so. I also made it up at a time where I was just like, I'm gonna liberate people through t-shirts. I did it at a time where you're just a really young, youthful, and happy person that's gonna like, where there's a will, there's a way. I wouldn't say I've gotten more pessimistic, but I've gotten more real with myself over time, which makes me transition into the second part, which is, so after the 10 people died or were murdered in Buffalo, I like kind of like had the language, right? I've always had this in the back of my mind, but I finally had the language to finally say it out loud, and it was just like, oh, I'm never gonna save the world through a t-shirt, right? There's no t-shirt I can make that will end racism, right? And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that was, for me, was like a really big reason why I started the brand, was just like, it's not necessarily how I thought, but that's how I thought. But somewhere along the way, I went from someone who was like super focused on like putting all of this information into a t-shirt and like trying to like teach and educate people and like liberate people through t-shirts, to now growing to the point where it's just like, I actually just love the process of making and designing, whether it's t-shirts, objects, or so on and so forth. And it's okay if it has a understory or black story undertone, but it's also okay for you to make for the sake of making, because you're never going to make a t-shirt that's going to end racism. And so I think like that has allowed me to like finally be free. And so I guess to answer your question more concisely, the stories that I'm more focused on telling are Black futures. I did a project for school recently, and it was my first chance to, I wrote a short story in like a 24-hour period, and then I edited it over a 48-hour period. And it was like this really crazy experience because I felt like something took over me and so on and so forth. But essentially, I had designed a vest that then inspired the story, the entire short story that I wrote, which then inspired a bunch of other objects that I had made. And it was really fun because I was able to create a universe for my clothes. And so that kind of put the seed in my head. So for my last, my Let Black Boys Be, that was my favorite, lookbook I ever shot, because it was the set design, and I was like, it was this like universe in which I had in my head, and I was like, I want people to come join me there. And I think that that's like my motif, and that's the story that I have for like my brand now. It is, I'm no longer trying to like ask people to come, right? It's more of like, this is my universe, and I'm inviting you in to, and if you want to come in, you can come in, and if not, like that's okay as well. But like, yeah, my focus has been to like really have what's in here really manifest itself and make it to a place where people feel like they can like be transported there. It's like, yeah, I have like these really big dreams and ideas to like create characters in which like people can like literally be a part of, and like universes where it's like, oh, I really do feel like I'm inside of a progression experience, right? It feels like this is where Black people should be. It's a utopia, it's a joy, it's a place where I want Black people to find joy in that specific space or moment.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And I mean, even if the backstory changes or, you know, the ambition that you had when you were 20 that you want t-shirts to liberate and you know, oppression or prejudice and things of that nature, I think, you know, your name, the name of the brand really speaks for what you're doing overall.
Yeah.
Too. So, you know, was that not like luck, but was it something that, because I mean, you came up with the name for the brand years ago.
Yeah.
I guess, where did it come from?
Yeah, so I've always been like this fake, you know, introspective dude my whole life. So I used to live in Nigeria my junior year of high school.
Okay.
And so when I was living out there, you know, it was my opportunity to like, well, that's where I fell in love with myself, like for the first time. You know, you grow up and you know, hear your friends, the teacher turn the light off. Where I wouldn't even be the darkest person in the room, but because, you know, I'm Nigerian, you know what I'm trying to say? So like, where's Sam go? Yeah. Or African booty scratcher. Substitute teachers come in, they be like chopping your name up real crazy.
Real bad.
And I remember, man, like I was in class when I moved to Nigeria. And I'm sitting in class, man, and the teacher's doing roll call. She's like, Oluwase Adeleke. And I'm like, yo, did the teacher just say my... It was crazy, dog. Like, I went 16 years of my whole life before I finally was able to be in a place where, like, a teacher knew how to say my name and it wasn't, like, no hesitation behind. She pronouncing it better than I can, you know? So yeah, that was a place where like I remember it vividly. It was like around Christmas. My mom had just came in from the States to come visit me and my brother while we were out there. And we're walking back from, you know, the bus station back to the crib. And I see a man. And I'm like, that dude is really, really handsome, man. And I'm like, we kind of favor each other. So I was like, so if I think he's handsome, then that means that by default, like, I gotta think that I'm a handsome. And so it's really like the place where I truly learned to like fall in love with like all the features that make me myself and just like things that just define us, like our wide noises, our just our beautiful names and so on and so forth. And so I asked my teacher, my Yoruba teacher while I was out there, like, yo, like, what does my name mean? And so Oluwase means, God's gift or God made this. And then Adeleke actually means progression with the crown. So the name of my brand, the full name, right, is Progression, but the alternate name is Progression with the Crown, LLC as well. And yeah, the name of the brand is my last name, technically. Wow. No, well, not technically, it is.
Wow.
What my last name translates to as well. So yeah, I was just like, and then I was thinking about like, you know, progression of Black people with the crown. You know, you 20 years old, you think it's dope, it's hard. So yeah, but it's full circle moment. See, that's where the name of the brand comes from.
That's lovely. No, it's a little ordainment, you know, because it's interesting. You talk to a lot of artists, talk to a lot of creatives, and once you kind of start on your path, you start on like your mission. Yeah. A lot of things just fall into place.
Yeah, 100%. That's one thing.
Without even that much force or your foresight. So, I was curious. I was like, wow, that's such a well-named.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and it is. I always tell people, man.
And it allows you to not to stay stagnant either.
Yeah, just always progress all the time. Yeah,
you can change up the narrative a little bit, tweak this and that, and it's still going to convey that message of like, you know, continuance.
And pushing forth like as a people and so on and so forth. Yeah, I always like I have this concept that me and my homies like buy into, you know, inspired by Nas, but it's like it was written, you know. So I feel like everything in my life, you know, it's already written and I just literally have to like go get it. You know, it's already there. You just gotta literally just stay focused, disciplined, and just go get it. And I think that's why so many people, you know, I think like when you ask a lot of people, you know, I know there's someone out there that has so much more than me, right? Just like there's people out there that I have so much more than. But oftentimes I think like when I'm on my deathbed, I know there's a bunch of stuff I could complain about, but like when it's all said and done, like if someone was to ask like, yo, did you live like a relatively good life? It's like, yeah, like I actually like for the most part, like I did. And I think like that a big part of that is because like I don't our intention here is not to suffer, right? Like the purpose is just to like do your very, very best to find that joy, even if it's only in pockets of it. And I think that that's what so many people are chasing. That's what I'm chasing. So yeah, like it was written. So I think that's why everything falls into place.
Word, man, word. I wondered, there's hundreds of people in the city right now, all around, who want to start their own brand.
Yeah.
They want to do their own thing. What would you say is like the most important thing, or like the first place they should start in order to get going? And even conceptually, it doesn't even have to be
I think so many people, they want everything to be perfect. And I think that that's like the number one reason why a lot of people's like dreams fall by the wayside, is because they're waiting for the perfect moment. And I know that this is really cliche to say, like, oh, there's never going to be a perfect moment, but like I really am being genuine. Like I had one of my homies reach out to me and they were like, yo, I want to start a company, so on and so forth. I wanted to ask you about like an LLC and a copyright and da-da-da-da. And I was like, yo, I was operating the first 4 years of my brand without an LLC, right? I was operating, like, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, you just,
make it work.
You just gotta just I was just selling to the homies, right? $20 here, $20 there, just to have the clothes out there, you know what I'm trying to say? So I think there'll never ever be a perfect moment, and you literally just have to like go out there and execute, and just do the very, very best, man. One of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten from my professor was like, yo, how do you know when a project is done? And he said, whenever the client says it's due, right? Like, sometimes you just got to work it until a certain point and then understand that right now there's nothing else to do and then walk away. If you, like, notice on my brand, I do versions of stuff, right? So, like, I dropped our hats 2 years ago. We're about to celebrate the 3rd anniversary. That was the first version of the hat. I dropped the updated version where the quality was better. That was V2. I'm actually working on V3 right now. So I think that's another thing that a lot of people should like become comfortable with is like starting a project and then starting a project and getting it to as far as you can get it using the resources you have. And then as you're learning, when you revisit it, use the more resources you have. When you're learning, revisit. So it's like, I don't care if I might get up to version 10 of a hat if I like, keep retooling it enough, right? So I think that that's like the one thing I think a lot of people should become comfortable with is like just understanding that there's never gonna be a perfect moment. And if the best thing you could release is a t-shirt on Gildan, release a t-shirt on Gildan.
Right.
I release t-shirts on Gildan. Yeah. I don't use Gildan anymore, but I needed to because another thing is like, you gotta sell your shirt for $15, $20 before you can start selling your shirt for $200. I think a lot of people also come out the bat saying like, people gotta support my business, and I say my stuff is like worth this much, and it's like, you gotta be honest, you gotta be realistic with yourself, right? If you're making t-shirts and it only cost you $5 to make, and you try and sell them for $80, you bogus. Like, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, no one knows you yet. Like, sell their shirt for $25 and just get it out there, right? You know what I'm trying to say? So, yeah, and then I think another thing as well is like, I'm just gonna really emphasize the 10,000 hours. I think a lot of people also just try to like jump into stuff. When I was like in my early 20s, I used to be really upset when people did this. Less now, just because I understand just to have more patience with people, and some people just don't understand or have the resources or the access or the knowledge to do certain things. But people would just always ask me certain questions about like, yo, like, where'd you get this thing from? Or how'd you find this thing? And I would be upset because I'd be like, Google it. Yeah. Because like, that's genuinely what I did. Like this dude was like, how did you find like the jacket blanks that you did it in? I'm like, I literally just Googled it, And I think like at the center of everything you want to do in life, research needs to be at the center of it. You're wasting your time. Because I'd say it like this, like, everything that you want to do in life has already been done.
Facts.
Why would you try to go and do it on your own merit when there's literally someone else out there that has laid out the blueprint for you? Yeah. Virgil Abloh literally has a website that's present right now that says, yo, if you want to start a business, this is the website you go to, and I will literally show you how to start a streetwear brand. Why aren't you on his website if you're serious about starting a streetwear brand? Like, research. Research. Like, yes, like that's if you're doing the little points, that's the big dot, like that's where we at.
That's the concentric circle that you got to stay around.
Yeah.
It's the orbit. I think that's a really valuable point because if people have, ambitions that don't have the gravity, drop it. But once you find that thing,
Yeah.
sink your teeth into it. You got to stay with it.
Yeah, and then I always tell people the best thing I never did was quit. So many amazing opportunities literally started happening year 5. If I literally quit on year 4, 363, like those opportunities don't come through. It takes 10 years to become an overnight success.
I'm gonna let that sink in, Philip. I'm gonna let that breathe for a moment because that's fact.
I'm halfway through.
Yeah, I mean, you've been putting the work in, and that's why I'm happy to have you on because you've been staying the course for 5 years. It's no small task. And I've seen at your Soho showcase, you had each iteration of all of your products, and unfortunately, I left before the raffle because I really needed one. I was about to take one off the table and run out, bro. You don't even realize. But I guess when it comes to your brand, now I'm gonna let that breathe for those who are looking to start their own thing and get into their whatever ambition they have. But when you think about progression, how do you distinguish it from other streetwear brands? Like what delineates you from what separates you from other brands?
I think my homie had told me something one day, and I was like, I really, really wanted to work with this big brand. And I'm like, yo, like, why would they want to work with me? Like, why should I tell them? And he was just like, because no one can tell a story better than you can. And I think that's kind of like where, I differentiate myself. I don't even try. I think the older I get, the more progression becomes less of a traditional clothing brand and more of an experimental studio for me, where I genuinely I want a progression car. I want to sell a car, right? I'm in conversations with people to try to actually do that type of thing. So that's kind of where my head is at, where it's just this experimental design studio, where I just want to try stuff. I have a question and I want to answer it, and if it's through a black lens, I want to answer it through progression. And I think that is where I differentiate myself, is I genuinely look at progression as a research studio. We research, and then I create I'm a researcher that happens to design. I research, and then I'm like, this is interesting.
And you put out your results.
And then I put out my results.
It's
fresh. I tell people I'm constantly in conversation with my work, right? I remember when I came out with the triple black progression. That's my favorite thing that I've ever done.
I was going to ask you what your favorite piece was.
Yeah, it's definitely that one right now because the storytelling but it was it was a study on materiality, right? So at the time I was really, really interested in touch and materiality, and so I was just to someone who doesn't know, it just looks like a cool jacket, but to someone who understands the different pieces in there, it's just it's this moment where the jacket is all black, where you can kind of see the Let Black Boys Be on the back in certain lighting, and so it's a conversation about the Fade to Black collection, where it's easy to kind of let black men kind of fade into obscurity, kind of to kind of overlook the plight of the black man, where it's if you look hard enough, you can kind of see it, but if you don't want to pay attention to it, it's not there, right?
And do you leave that to be interpreted, or do you?
Yeah, I leave that to be interpreted. Gotcha. Yeah, because I also I'm really big on saying that I believe that my audience is smart, right? And you can pull whatever you want to pull from it, but this is my interpretation of the work. And then it coming in this all black box on the outside, but then when you open it up, the inside is yellow, and so the inside represents the light. That all these, so that the collection was limited to a few black men that I really, really loved and appreciated, and kind of felt they offered the light.
Yeah.
But then we also included a pin in there, and so the pin was also that representation of a light. And so what ended up happening was this collection was all black, and then I released the most recent one, which is called Bloom. And so it was kind of supposed to.
That's why you have the flowers as a symbolism on it.
Exactly. So and so the bottom of the box of the triple black jacket said, the seeds have been planted for a colorful spring. And so on the bottom of the new jackets, the bottom of that box says, these are the seeds now bloom. So they're literally in conversation with each other. But I think the interesting thing as well is the jackets are also in color. My favorite thing about the triple black jacket is the patch on the side is grayscale, whereas the patch on the colorful spring jackets are this bright blue color. And so literally the clothes are in conversation with each other. And that's an experimentation where it's just what happens when I tell a story when it's like, you know, wintertime, and then come back to that story again when it's bloom, right? So like that in that time, like the story was about like the different seasons, and about like black men and the sadness that we can have. But then on the opposite side, right, the lookbook was like about black joy and capturing like black men being
I love that
happy.
lookbook, by the way.
You know,
That
I
was
appreciate
really
it. So
well
it's
done.
like, yeah, it's just like it's an experimental studio. That's why everything is so important to me. The clothes are the easy. I always tell people the clothes are the easiest part for me. The fun part and the more grueling part is like, how do I package this to the world so they
Yeah.
understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
And I think people really appreciate that. And I think, yeah, I would say that like, yeah, it's like,
It's imbued in meaning.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what people buy. People buy meaning.
Yeah.
People are attracted to meaning. That's why they stay
Yeah.
wherever they are, because it
Yeah.
has meaning to them. Their home, you know, a house is not a home, but not any house is a home.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is that you hold on to, everything has sentimental value if it has meaning. And I think that's what can happen very easily when you make products. It can be very vacuous. You can really just
Yeah.
have no sense of
Yeah.
attachment to a greater narrative or history or whatever it is that means what it should to a mass of people, which is what I think is really starting to take hold with your brand. I think the more collections you release, you know, I saw your Black Women Are the Future hoodie when I was having brunch like a month or so ago, and I mean, I know you, I know the brand, but I could tell, like, you know, the surrounding patrons in the restaurant where, you know, they all turned their head and definitely like stirred up some thoughts, and that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to
conversations.
spread the conversation around via your product, and I think it's a beautiful thing.
I appreciate that.
And I'm really glad that you're sticking to it.
Yeah.
You know,
Me too.
best thing you never did. Best
I'm
thing you
like,
did was never quit. So.
yeah, I'm like, I guess I'm really doing this. I'm like, it's funny, man. Like, I literally got into so I'm also a design student. So after I did my, you know, my study on my own, I was like, it's important to be designed by professionals. Trained by professionals. So I went back to school for my master's. But I literally got into the School of Design as well as the School of Public Health, and I had to make a decision. And it was at one point where like I was like mad with the brand, and I'm just like, I should have went to public health school, man. But yeah, man, the best thing I never did was quit. So, yeah,
well,
man.
congrats on getting into the program. Congrats on the brand. Is there anything else you want to share? Like any last pieces of information or some gems you want to impart?
I don't know, just never quit. I guess, just never quit on yourself. I think life is too short to not like do what you want to do, and I think even when I say like never quit, it's like not even necessarily focused on like monetizing whatever you want your like hobby to be, but I just genuinely mean it when I say like progression is my reason to live. I always say like that was like God's gift to me, and I don't know what I would be doing if I didn't have it, and so it's like. Yeah, it's like when I do progression, it's genuinely for like myself, but it's also for the people. And so like, I think that everyone should just like never quit on whatever they want to do in life. And no matter what level you do it at, the fact that you did it is the special part. And so, yeah, man.
So, man,
Yeah,
it's
I
a beautiful
appreciate
thing
you
to hear you talk about it. And, you know, from the mouth of the creator, that adjective thing that we say is description is everything. How would you describe it? You know, and you described it very well. I think you've given a lot of context, a lot of, text to the universe that you're putting together, and I can't wait to see the next collections. You just dropped this last collection, so if you haven't had a chance to check out this collection, please go and check that out. My man did a great, beautiful job with this one. So until next time, man, I'm looking forward to having you back.
Appreciate you so much, man. Thank you.
Of course.
Yes.
That's a wrap.